I'm Lillian Monroe, and the moment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday afternoon in a grocery store parking lot in Portland, Oregon. I was sitting in my 2004 Honda Civic, the one with the broken air conditioning and the passenger window that wouldn't roll up, counting quarters to see if I had enough for gas to make it to my night shift at the diner. That's when a man in an expensive charcoal suit approached my window, briefcase in hand, looking completely out of place among the rusted shopping carts and cigarette butts. "Excuse me, are you Lillian Monroe?" he asked. I looked down at my stained uniform, the ketchup splatter on my collar from the lunch rush, my hands rough from years of scrubbing dishes. "Who's asking?" "My name is Robert Chandler. I'm an estate attorney from San Francisco. I've been searching for you for 3 months. He paused, studying my face. "Ms. Monroe, your grandmother passed away 6 weeks ago. You're the sole beneficiary of her estate. You've just inherited $47 million. The quarters slipped from my hands, scattering across the floorboard. But let me take you back to where this really began. Because inheritance stories always start long before the money arrives. They start with the choices that break us, the people who abandon us, and the moments we decide whether to stay broken or rebuild ourselves into something they never expected. 10 years earlier, I was 22 years old, standing in a cramped apartment in Seattle, holding my college diploma in art history. My mother sat on my second-hand couch, her face tight with disappointment that had become so familiar I'd barely noticed it anymore. "Art history," she said, the words dripping with disdain. "We told you to study something useful. Nursing. Accounting. Teaching. But you had to follow your passion." She made the words sound like an insult. My father stood by the window, arms crossed. "Your sister became a pharmacist. She has a house. A retirement plan. What do you have?" "A piece of paper that qualifies you to work at a museum gift shop." "I'm applying for curatorial positions," I said quietly, hating how small my voice sounded. "The Seattle Art Museum has an opening. You think they're going to hire you?" My mother laughed, sharp and cutting. "Do you know how many graduates they get every year? Hundreds. And you're just average, Lillian. You always have been." That word, average, hit like a slap. Because she wasn't being cruel in that moment. She genuinely believed it. To her, I was plain, unremarkable, destined for a mediocre life because I'd chosen passion over practicality. "We're not coming to your graduation ceremony," my father announced. "Your sister needs help moving into her new house that weekend. She's achieved something worth celebrating." They left 20 minutes later. I didn't cry until I heard their car pull away. But what happened next set the course for the next decade of my life, and it wasn't what anyone expected. I met David 3 months after graduation at a gallery opening where I was working as a server, passing champagne to people who looked through me like I was furniture. He was 35, successful, the owner of a tech consulting firm. He complimented my earrings, tiny paintbrush charms I'd bought at a craft fair, and asked about my background. "Art history degree," I said, waiting for the usual dismissive response. Instead, he smiled. "That's fascinating. I've always wished I understood art better. Maybe you could teach me?" For the first time in months, someone made me feel valuable. Smart. Interesting. We were married within a year. I was 23. He was 36. "You don't need to work," David said after the honeymoon. "I make enough for both of us. Just focus on making our home beautiful." That's a full-time job, isn't it? At first, it felt like love. Like being cherished. He bought me nice things, clothes, jewelry, a car, but every gift came with invisible strings I didn't recognize until they'd already wrapped around my throat. When I mentioned taking a part-time position at a small gallery, David frowned. "Why? Are you unhappy? Am I not providing enough?" "No, it's not that. Then why would you want to work for minimum wage when you could be here, taking care of our home?" "Unless..." His voice dropped. "Unless you don't appreciate what I do for you." I dropped the idea. And then I dropped every other dream that followed. The control was subtle at first. He'd schedule vacations during interviews I'd lined up. He'd forget to mention important calls from galleries until days later. When I tried to volunteer at the Portland Art Museum, he pointed out that Wednesday evenings, their volunteer night, was when his business partners' wives came for dinner parties I was expected to host. "You have one job, Lillian," he'd say with that patient smile. "Being my wife. Why isn't that enough for you?" So I became smaller. Quieter. I stopped talking about exhibitions I wanted to see. I stopped sketching ideas for potential installations. I filled my days with cooking classes and gym memberships and book clubs where we discussed everything except what any of us actually wanted from life. My mother called once a month. "See? We told you that degree was useless. At least you married well. David's a good provider." Translation: at least someone wanted you. The marriage lasted 7 years. 7 years of shrinking myself to fit into a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt like suffocating from the inside. When I discovered David's affair with his 26-year-old marketing consultant, when I found the texts, the hotel receipts, the photos, I expected to feel devastated. Instead, I felt relief. "I want a divorce," I told him. David's lawyer was excellent. Mine was overworked and underpaid from a legal aid clinic. The prenuptial agreement I'd signed at 23, too naive and in love to read carefully, was ironclad. He kept the house, both cars, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio. I got my old Honda Civic, my art history books, and $8,000 from our joint checking account. "Good luck," David said the day I moved out. "You're 30 years old with no job experience and a useless degree. Hope that passion of yours keeps you warm at night." But here's the thing nobody tells you about rock bottom: it's surprisingly solid. When you've lost everything, you realize you have nothing left to lose. And that's when you become dangerous. I moved into a studio apartment in a rough neighborhood, $6.50 a month, paint peeling from the walls, sirens every night. I worked 3 jobs: morning shift at a bakery, afternoon shifts at the diner, weekend nights cleaning office buildings. I slept 4 hours a night. My hands were constantly raw. My feet ached. I lost 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. But I was free. Every spare moment, I studied. Online courses in art conservation. Museum study certifications. Grant writing workshops. I volunteered every Sunday at a community arts center in a predominantly immigrant neighborhood, teaching art classes to kids whose parents worked 3 jobs just like I did. Those kids didn't care that I was average. They cared that I showed up, that I saw their potential, that I taught them to mix colors and understand perspective and believe their creativity mattered. One of my students, a 12-year-old girl named Maria whose family had immigrated from Guatemala, created a mixed media piece about her grandmother's journey to America. It was stunning. Raw and honest and heartbreaking. "Ms. Lillian," she asked quietly after class, "do you really think I could be an artist? My dad says it's not a real job." I knelt beside her, remembering my own parents' dismissal, my ex-husband's condescension, every person who'd made me feel small for dreaming. "Maria, listen to me. Your voice matters. Your perspective matters. The world needs people who can show others how to see beauty, pain, hope, humanity. Don't let anyone convince you that creating meaning isn't valuable work." Her eyes filled with tears. "But what if I'm not good enough?" "Then you practice until you are. And then you practice more. Being an artist isn't about talent alone, it's about persistence, courage, and refusing to let other people's limitations become yours." I meant every word. But I didn't realize I was also talking to myself. What happened next changed the entire trajectory of my life. The community arts center where I volunteered was closing. Budget cuts, funding dried up, landlords selling the building. The director, a woman in her 60s named Patricia who'd dedicated 40 years to arts education, was devastated. "These kids have nothing," she said, voice breaking. "No after-school programs. No art classes in their schools. This center is where they come to be seen, to matter. And we're just done. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Maria, about the 30 other kids who showed up every week, about being 13 and having no one who believed in you. At 2 a.m., exhausted from my shift at the cleaning company, I started writing a grant proposal. I had no experience. No credentials. No reason to think it would work. But I wrote anyway. I spent 3 weeks researching foundations, crafting narratives, creating budgets, compiling documentation. I wrote about the immigrant communities we served, the academic studies showing how arts education improved outcomes for at-risk youth, the specific programs we could implement with proper funding. I submitted applications to 14 different foundations. 13 rejected us. The 14th, a small family foundation focused on immigrant communities, requested a meeting. I showed up in my only professional outfit, a blazer I'd bought at Goodwill, pants I'd hemmed myself. I brought a portfolio of student work. I brought data. I brought passion. The foundation director was a woman in her 50s named Catherine. She listened to my entire presentation without interrupting. "Ms. Monroe, I have one question," she finally said. "What makes you think you can run this program when you have no professional experience in arts administration?" I took a breath. "You're right. I have no professional experience. What I have is 4 years of showing up every Sunday without pay because I believe these kids deserve someone who sees their potential. I have 3 jobs that barely cover rent, but I'm here anyway because this matters more than sleep. I have student work that speaks for itself. And I have absolute certainty that if we don't give these kids space to create, to be seen, to matter, we're failing them in ways that statistics can't measure." Catherine studied me for a long moment. "We'll fund you for 1 year. $75,000. If you can demonstrate measurable impact, we'll renew for 3 more years at increased funding." I walked out of that office and cried in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Running that program while working multiple jobs was brutal. But for the first time in a decade, I was building something that was mine. Not my husband's life. Not my parents' disappointment. Mine. We kept the arts center open. Enrollment tripled. Local artists started volunteering as teaching assistants. We launched a summer intensive program. Maria's work was selected for a regional youth exhibition. At the end of year 1, Catherine's foundation renewed our funding, $120,000 for 3 years. "You've built something special," Catherine told me. "You should consider applying for larger grants. National foundations." So I did. And I failed. A lot. But I also succeeded. Small victories that added up. A $10,000 grant from a regional arts council. A $25,000 donation from a local tech company. Partnerships with 2 nearby schools that sent students to our after-school programs. By year 3, our annual budget was $300,000. We'd served over 200 students. We'd hired 2 part-time teaching artists. We'd launched a scholarship program for students pursuing arts education in college. And I'd finally quit my other jobs. I was making $45,000 a year as executive director, not much, but enough to move into a better apartment, enough to sleep more than 4 hours a night, enough to feel like maybe I wasn't average after all. My parents never called to congratulate me. My ex-husband never knew I existed anymore. My sister sent a brief text, "Glad you found something that makes you happy." Translation, still not a real job. But here's what I learned during those years: external validation is a trap. The moment you need other people to confirm your worth is the moment you give them power over your life. I stopped waiting for my parents to be proud. I stopped needing David to regret leaving me. I stopped measuring my value against my sister's house and retirement plan. I measured it against Maria's acceptance to art school on a full scholarship. Against the 8-year-old boy who told me our center was the only place he felt safe. Against the mother who hugged me in tears because her daughter finally believed she could dream beyond survival. That became enough. But then, 5 years after I'd started rebuilding my life, everything changed again. Robert Chandler, the estate attorney in the grocery store parking lot, insisted on meeting properly at his Portland office the next day. I showed up in my diner uniform, smelling like coffee and bacon grease, completely certain this was either a scam or a mistake. He handed me a folder. Inside were legal documents, property deeds, investment portfolios, and a handwritten letter. "Your grandmother was Margaret Chen," he said. "She passed away 6 weeks ago at 92. You were her only grandchild." "I've never met any Margaret Chen," I said, confused. "She was your father's mother. She immigrated from Hong Kong in the 1960s, built a successful import business, invested wisely, and accumulated substantial wealth. She tried to contact your father multiple times over the years, but he refused all communication." "Why?" Robert's expression was carefully neutral. "That's something you'd need to ask him. What I can tell you is that Margaret never stopped looking for you. She hired investigators 3 years ago when her health declined. They tracked you here to Portland. She wanted to meet you, but she passed away before she could arrange it." He slid the letter across the desk. "She left this for you." The handwriting was shaky but clear. "Dearest Lillian, I'm sorry we never met. Your father cut ties with me when he was 23 because I disapproved of his choices, specifically, his decision to marry your mother, who shared his obsession with status and appearances over substance and character. I was harsh in my judgment. He was unforgiving in his anger. We both lost decades because of pride. I've followed your life from a distance. I know about your marriage, your divorce, your struggles. I know about the arts center you built from nothing. I know about the children whose lives you've changed. What you've accomplished with no resources, no support, no encouragement, that is real wealth. The money I'm leaving you is simply the foundation you deserved from the beginning. Use it wisely. Live boldly. And never let anyone convince you that building a meaningful life is less valuable than building an impressive-looking one. Your grandmother, Margaret." I read it 3 times, tears blurring the words. "The estate is valued at approximately $47 million, Robert continued. Properties in San Francisco and Hong Kong, investment portfolios, cash assets, and her import business, which still generates annual revenue of approximately $3 million. It's all yours." The first thing I did was absolutely nothing. I didn't quit my job. I didn't move. I didn't tell anyone. I spent 2 weeks processing the surreal reality that my entire life had changed while sitting in the same apartment, wearing the same uniform, living the same routine. Then I called my parents. "We need to meet," I said. They agreed to coffee at a shop near their suburban home, the house they'd bought the same year they told me my degree was worthless. I arrived first. Ordered tea. Waited. My mother spotted me and grimaced. "Lillian, you're wearing your work uniform. We're in public." "Sit down," I said calmly. They sat, exchanging glances. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." I folded my hands on the table. "For 30 years, you've treated me like a disappointment. Like I was average, unremarkable, destined for mediocrity because I chose passion over prestige. You skipped my college graduation. You dismissed my career. You never once asked if I was happy, if I felt fulfilled, if I was proud of what I'd built." My father started to speak. I held up a hand. "I'm not done. For years, I believed you. I thought maybe you were right. Maybe I was average. Maybe choosing art history was a mistake. Maybe I deserved the life I got, the controlling husband, the poverty, the constant struggle." My mother's face was tight. "We were trying to protect you, you were trying to make me small enough to fit your idea of success. But here's what you never understood, I was never average. I was just surrounded by people who couldn't see value in anything they didn't personally understand." I slid a folder across the table. Inside were financial statements, property documents, and Margaret's letter. Your mother, my grandmother, passed away 6 weeks ago. She left me her entire estate. $47 million. The color drained from my father's face. She tried to contact you for years, I continued. You refused. Because she disapproved of your choices, just like you disapproved of mine. The difference is, she never stopped caring. She tracked me down. She watched from a distance. She left me everything because she saw what you never did, that building a meaningful life matters more than building an impressive-looking one. My mother's voice was small. Lillian, I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because I want you to understand what you lost. Not the money, you were never going to get that anyway. But the relationship. The chance to know who I actually became when I stopped trying to be what you wanted. I stood to leave. Wait, my father said. What are you going to do with, build something that matters, I said. Which is what I've been doing all along. You just never looked closely enough to notice. I walked out of that coffee shop and never looked back. The foundation I created, the Margaret Chin Arts Initiative, launched 6 months later. Our mission was simple: support arts education in underserved communities, with a specific focus on immigrant and refugee populations. We funded 20 community arts centers in our first year. 50 in year 2. We launched a national fellowship program for emerging artists from marginalized backgrounds, $50,000 annual stipends, no strings attached, just trust that giving people resources unleashes potential. Maria, my former student, was one of our first fellows. She's now a professional artist whose work addresses immigration, identity, and belonging. She showed at the Whitney last year. I bought a small house in Portland, nothing ostentatious, just comfortable, and kept working, because the money was never the point. The work was always the point. The arts center where I'd volunteered, where I'd started this journey, became our flagship location. We expanded it, tripled our capacity, hired a full staff. On the day we opened the new building, Patricia, the original director, hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. You saved us, she whispered. No, I said. You saved me. You gave me a place to matter when I thought I didn't. 5 years after that conversation in the parking lot, I was invited to speak at my alma mater's graduation ceremony. The university wanted to honor my work and my philanthropic contributions. I'd endowed a scholarship program for first-generation students pursuing arts degrees. I almost said no. Public speaking terrified me. But then I thought about 22-year-old Lillian, standing in her cheap apartment, hearing her parents call her average, believing it was true. I said yes. Standing at that podium, looking at hundreds of graduates in their caps and gowns, I realized my parents were somewhere in that audience. They'd reached out months earlier, awkwardly trying to reconnect. I'd agreed to limited contact, polite, boundaried, without expectation. 10 years ago, I stood where you're sitting. I'd just earned my degree in art history. My parents didn't attend because they thought my education was worthless. A few years later, my husband told me the same thing. For a long time, I believed them. I could see students leaning forward, parents shifting uncomfortably. Here's what I wish I'd known then: other people's inability to recognize your value doesn't diminish it. Their limited vision doesn't limit your potential. Their fear of impractical dreams doesn't make your dreams less valid. I told them about the grocery store parking lot. About Margaret's letter. About the choice to use resources not for revenge or validation, but for building something meaningful. The money didn't change who I was. It revealed who I'd been becoming all along, someone who believed that art, education, creativity, and human potential were worth fighting for, even when nobody else agreed. My voice caught, but I pushed through. To the graduates whose families don't understand your choices, I see you. To those drowning in doubt, wondering if you made the right decision, I believe in you. To those terrified you'll fail because you chose passion over pragmatism, fail anyway. Fail spectacularly. Then get up and try again, because building a meaningful life is never a mistake, even when it looks nothing like success is supposed to look. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, my mother approached, her eyes red. Lillian, she stopped, struggling. I'm sorry. For all of it. I nodded slowly. Thank you. That means something. Are we? She hesitated. Is there a way to, maybe, I said honestly. But it starts with you understanding that I don't need your approval anymore. I needed it once. Desperately. But I built a life without it, and that life is full and purposeful and mine. If you want to be part of it, you're welcome. But only if you can accept me as I am, not as you wished I'd been. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. My father stood a few feet away, looking older than I remembered. I'm proud of you, Lillian. I should have said that a long time ago. Yes, I agreed. You should have. But the truth is, I didn't need to hear it anymore. Because I'd learned the most important lesson: the people who love you conditionally will always find conditions you can't meet. And the moment you stop trying to meet them is the moment you become free. Today, the Foundation supports 97 arts centers across 30 states. We've given over $200 million in grants. We've funded thousands of students. We've proven that investing in creativity, in human potential, in the belief that beauty and meaning matter, that's not impractical. It's essential. I'm 42 now. I built a life that's nothing like what my parents imagined, nothing like what David thought I deserved, nothing like what 22-year-old Lillian dared to dream. It's better. Because it's mine. Built on my terms. Shaped by my values. Filled with work that matters and people who see me clearly. Margaret was right. Real wealth isn't the money. It's the freedom to build a meaningful life without apology, without permission, without needing anyone's validation to know you're enough. I keep her letter in my desk. On hard days, and there are still hard days, I read it again. What you've accomplished with no resources, no support, no encouragement, that is real wealth. She was right. And so, to every woman reading this who's been called average, impractical, too much, not enough, who's been dismissed, underestimated, told her dreams don't matter, I want you to know something: you are not the problem. Their inability to see your worth is not evidence of your lack of worth. You are already everything you need to be. You just need space, resources, and support to become it fully. Build your life anyway. Pursue your passion anyway. Believe in your vision anyway. Because the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be small just because someone else can't handle your magnitude. You're not average. You never were. You were just waiting to find the courage to prove it, first to yourself, then to everyone who doubted you. And when you do, when you build that meaningful, purposeful, authentically yours life, the validation you once craved won't matter anymore. Because you'll have something better, the unshakable knowledge that you did it yourself, on your terms, and that you were always worth believing in.